Don't ignore this psalm, not because it is loud, not because it is dramatic, but because it arrived quietly, at the exact moment your heart needed it. Before anything else, don't rush, don't scroll, don't treat this like just another video. Pause, take a slow breath, not to relax, but to arrive, because this psalm found you for a reason. You didn't choose it by accident. You didn't land here randomly. In a world ruled by algorithms, schedules, deadlines, and noise, there are moments that cannot be explained by logic alone. This is one of them. There are nights when fear doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It shows up when the lights are off, when your body is tired, but your mind refuses to rest, when worries about tomorrow feel heavier than today. Bills, decisions, health, family, the future. You pray, but the words feel distant. You believe, but the silence feels long. You trust God, yet something inside you still feels unprotected. And you wonder, why does my heart feel restless if God is with me? Why do I still feel afraid if I pray? This psalm understands that question. This is not a psalm written for perfect days. It was not written for moments when life feels safe. It was written for nights, for uncertainty, for invisible battles, for people who believe in God but still feel vulnerable. This psalm is a prayer, but it is also a shelter, a place to rest your mind, a place to place your fear, a place where protection is not imagined, but promised. Many people read psalms looking for comfort. This psalm goes further. It speaks about protection when danger is unseen, peace when fear is internal, safety when answers are delayed. It speaks to those who feel watched by worry, surrounded by pressure, threatened not by one big problem, but by many small ones that never stop. If you have felt tired in ways sleep doesn't fix, if anxiety follows you even into prayer, if you love God but still fear what tomorrow might bring, this psalm was written for you. And as you listen, don't analyze every word. Don't rush ahead. Let it wash over you slowly. This is not a performance. This is a prayer that has crossed centuries, a prayer whispered by people who stood where you stand now, uncertain, faithful, afraid, hopeful. This psalm found you for a reason, not to entertain you, not to impress you, but to remind you of something ancient and powerful. You are not as exposed as you feel. You are not as alone as your thoughts suggest. You are not unprotected. Even when fear says otherwise, there is a presence that does not sleep, a refuge that does not close, a protection that does not depend on your strength. And before we read a single line, I want you to notice something. You're still here. You're listening. Your heart is open enough to stay. That alone is not a coincidence. As we move forward, this psalm will speak about danger, fear, night, protection, angels, shelter, and trust, not in abstract language, but in images your soul recognizes. And if at any point you feel your breathing slow, if your shoulders relax, if your thoughts quiet even slightly, that is not because of the voice. That is because truth calms what fear agitates. Stay with me, because this psalm didn't find you to scare you. It found you to cover you. And as we continue, I invite you to do something simple. Listen as if God Himself is speaking, not loudly, not urgently, but gently, directly, personally. Because sometimes God doesn't shout over the noise. Sometimes He waits for silence. And this is the moment where silence begins. Before this psalm ever became words on a page, it was a need in the human soul, a need to feel safe in a world that rarely feels stable. We live surrounded by walls, locks, passwords, alarms, and plans. And yet, fear still finds its way in. It doesn't always come from danger you can see. Sometimes it comes from thoughts you can't stop, from uncertainty that doesn't leave, from the quiet question you avoid asking out loud. What if something goes wrong? Fear today doesn't always look like enemies at the gate. It looks like anxiety in the chest, like tension in the jaw, like waking up already tired. You do everything right. You work, you plan, you pray, and still your mind keeps scanning the horizon. This psalm was written for that kind of fear, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that lives in responsible people, faithful people, people who care deeply. This psalm does not deny the existence of danger. It doesn't pretend life is harmless. It doesn't tell you to ignore reality. Instead, it does something stronger. It places reality inside God's protection. It acknowledges night, darkness, threats, illness, uncertainty, and then it speaks a truth that feels almost too bold, that even there, you are not alone. This psalm introduces an idea that feels radical in a fearful world. That protection does not begin with walls, but with where you dwell. Not physically, spiritually. It speaks about dwelling, remaining, abiding, not visiting God when fear shows up, but living in His presence. Many people pray when panic arrives. This psalm invites you to live where panic cannot rule. And that difference matters, because when fear comes, it always asks the same question: where's your safety now? This psalm answers before fear can finish the sentence. It doesn't say you will never feel afraid. It says fear will not have the final word. It doesn't promise the absence of trouble. It promises the presence of God. And presence changes everything. There's something deeply calming about knowing you don't have to see every danger to be protected from it, that you don't need to predict every outcome to be held through them. This psalm was not written by someone untouched by life. It was written by someone who understood night watches, hidden threats, long seasons without explanation. Someone who knew that faith does not cancel vulnerability, but gives a place to rest. As you listen, you may notice your body responding before your thoughts do. A slower breath, a sense of being watched over instead of watched by fear. That's not imagination. That's what happens when truth reaches a tired nervous system, because fear exhausts us by making us believe. Everything depends on our vigilance. This psalm releases you from that burden. It reminds you that there is a guardian who does not get tired, a watcher who does not look away, a protector who does not need permission to act. And before we begin the reading, let this settle in you. You are allowed to rest even before life feels resolved. You are allowed to feel safe even before answers arrive. You are allowed to trust even while questions remain. This psalm is not a magic formula. It is a declaration of where your safety truly lives. And now, as we move closer to its words, Let your heart soften, not to defend itself, but to receive. Because the psalm you are about to hear has carried generations through fear, and now it is here for you. Now listen carefully, not just with your ears, but with the part of you that gets tired of being alert all the time. This is Psalm 91, a psalm of protection, a psalm of refuge, a psalm written for those who live in a world where safety feels fragile. Let the words arrive slowly. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Notice the first word, dwells, not visits, not runs to occasionally. Dwells. This psalm does not begin with fear. It begins with location. Where you live spiritually matters. To dwell means to stay, to remain, to make a home. This psalm is not addressed to those who panic and run. It is spoken over those who choose to remain close. And the promise is simple but powerful. If you dwell in the shelter of the Most High, rest becomes possible again, not because danger disappears, but because you're no longer exposed. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. This is not whispered in fear. It is declared. A refuge is not a decoration. A fortress is not symbolic. These are words used by people who knew what it meant to need protection. This psalm names God not as an idea, but as a place, a refuge you can enter, a fortress you can hide within. And trust is not demanded here. It is chosen. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. Some dangers are obvious, others are hidden. The snare is not loud. It is silent, carefully placed. Fear today works the same way. It doesn't always attack openly. It traps through overthinking, through exhaustion, through constant pressure. This psalm speaks to dangers you don't see coming. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. This is not the language of distance. This is intimacy. Protection here is not cold or mechanical. It is close, covering, shielding, surrounding. You are not guarded from afar. You are held. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart, not your strength, not your consistency, not your perfect prayers. His faithfulness, and that matters, because some days your faith feels small. This psalm does not depend on your emotional stability. It depends on God's character. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day. Night and day, fear doesn't respect schedules. Neither does God protection. Fear comes at night when thoughts grow louder. Fear comes by day when responsibilities press in. This psalm covers both. It names what you feel without letting it rule you, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. Some threats stalk quietly, others strike openly. This psalm does not deny reality. It places reality under protection. And as these words settle, notice something happening inside you. Your body hears safety before your mind agrees, because peace does not argue. It arrives. Stay here. Let each line breathe. This psalm is not meant to be rushed. It is meant to be inhabited. And we are only beginning. Stay with the rhythm. Let the words move at the speed your heart can handle. 8,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. This line has unsettled people for centuries, not because it is cruel, but because it is bold. It does not say danger disappears. It says danger does not decide your fate. This psalm does not promise a world without collapse. It promises a life that is not governed by it. You may see chaos. You may hear bad news. You may feel surrounded by uncertainty. And yet, you are not exposed. Protection does not mean isolation. It means distinction. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. This is not about comparison. It is about positioning. The psalm is not inviting pride. It is reminding you where you stand. When fear tells you that you are next, this psalm answers calmly. You are covered. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling. Again, the psalm returns to the same idea. Not emergency prayer, not panic-driven faith. Dwelling, where you live spiritually, determines what is access to you. This is not about perfection. It is about orientation. Who do you run to first? Fear or refuge? No harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent. A tent is fragile, temporary, exposed, and yet God promises protection even there. This psalm does not require permanence to offer safety. It protects you even in transition, even when life feels temporary, even when you don't know where you'll be next. You are not disqualified from protection because your life feels unsettled. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. This line is quiet, but powerful. It does not say angels watch from a distance. It says they are commanded, assigned, concerned with your ways, your movements, your steps, not just the big moments, but the ordinary ones, the drive home, the decision you're delaying, the night you couldn't sleep. You are not navigating life alone. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. This is gentle protection, not dramatic rescue, preventive care, small interventions that keep small things from becoming devastating ones. You may never know how many times you were spared, and you don't need to. This psalm is not meant to make you alert. It is meant to let you rest, because someone else is watching, someone else is guarding. And as these words continue, the psalm will move from protection around you to authority within you. But before we go there, pause. Notice how different this feels from the fear that brought you here. Fear tightens. This psalm steadies. Fear isolates. This psalm surrounds. Fear exhausts. This psalm holds. You are not exposed. You are not forgotten. You are not unguarded. And the psalm is not finished speaking. Listen as the tone of the psalm begins to shift. Up to now, it has spoken about protection around you, covering, guarding, sheltering. Now it speaks about what happens within you. When you live under that protection, you will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. These are not gentle images. They are ancient symbols of danger, of fear, of things that strike suddenly and overpower quietly. The psalm does not deny their existence. It places you above them. This is not arrogance. It is authority that comes from knowing where your safety truly is. When you are constantly afraid, everything feels bigger than you. But when you dwell in God's shelter, fear loses its scale. Problems remain real, but they are no longer sovereign. This psalm is not teaching you to fight harder. It is teaching you to stand differently. You are not called to wrestle fear endlessly. You are called to walk forward, knowing it does not own the ground beneath your feet. And then something remarkable happens. The voice shifts. Up until now, the psalm has been spoken about God. Now, God speaks for himself. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. This is not conditional love. It is relational language, not perfection, not performance. Love, acknowledgement, relationship. God does not say, because he never doubts, or because he is always strong. He says, because he loves me. That matters, especially on days when your faith feels quiet. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. Notice what God promises. Not the absence of trouble, but presence within it. This is one of the most grounding truths in the entire psalm. God does not abandon you until things improve. He enters the moment fear tells you, you are alone. I will be with him in trouble. Not watching from a distance, not waiting for it to pass. With you, I will deliver him and honor him. Deliverance is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is slow, quiet, invisible to others, but God sees it all. And honor here does not mean applause. It means dignity. It means you are not reduced by what you endure. Your fear does not define you. Your struggle does not erase your worth. And finally, with long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. This is not just about years. It is about fullness, a life not ruled by constant fear, a heart not always bracing for impact. Salvation here is not only future, it is present. It is peace now, stability now, covering now, as this psalm reaches its final breath. Notice how it has moved you from fear to shelter, to trust, to authority, to relationship. This is not accidental. This psalm was not written to hype you up. It was written to settle you down. And as we move forward, we will begin to speak into your present life, your nights, your decisions, your waiting, because this psalm is not finished with. Now that you've heard the words, something important happens. Silence. And silence is often where fear tries to return. It comes back softly, as a thought, as a memory, as a question that sounds reasonable. But what about tomorrow? What about what I can't control? This is where this psalm becomes more than something you listen to. This is where it becomes something you live with. Because fear rarely leaves forever. It tests you. It revisits old doors. It checks whether it still has access. This psalm prepares you for that, not by teaching you how to argue with fear, but by reminding you where you stand when it arrives. Fear wants you alert. God invites you to dwell. Fear wants constant attention. God offers constant presence. When anxiety shows up at night, it often disguises itself as responsibility. If I don't worry, something will go wrong. If I relax, I'll miss something important. This psalm gently interrupts that lie. Protection does not increase when you panic. It is already established. You are not guarding your life alone. You are not carrying the future by yourself. There is something deeply freeing about realizing that God does not need your anxiety to stay involved. This psalm was written to be remembered when fear tries to renegotiate its place in your mind, when you feel the familiar tightness in your chest, when your thoughts begin racing ahead, when peace feels fragile. Return to the beginning. He who dwells, not runs, not hides, dwells. Dwelling is a choice you make repeatedly. You choose where your mind settles, where your heart rests, where your thoughts return when they wander. This psalm is not meant to be read once and forgotten. It is meant to become familiar, a place you revisit, a shelter you recognize. And this matters especially when you face decisions. Decisions carry weight, unknown outcomes. Fear loves to attach itself to them. What if I choose wrong? What if this costs me something? This psalm does not promise perfect clarity. It promises guidance under protection, angels guarding your ways, God present in trouble, faithfulness as a shield. That means you are not deciding alone. Even when the path feels unclear, you are not unaccompanied. And here is something fear never tells you. You don't need to feel brave to be protected. You don't need to feel confident to be covered. You don't need to feel strong to be held. This psalm removes performance from safety. Protection is not earned by calmness. It is sustained by presence, and presence is already promised. So when fear tries to return, don't fight aggressively. Return gently. Return to the shelter. Return to the words. Return to the truth that does not change with your emotions. You are not exposed. You are not abandoned. You are not carrying this alone. And as we continue, we will move into something even quieter, a rhythm, a repetition, because peace does not arrive once. It settles through remembering. There's a reason this psalm is meant to be returned to, not studied once, not rushed through, returned to. Peace rarely arrives all at once. It settles in layers, and repetition is how the soul learns safety. Fear repeats itself constantly. It cycles. It revisits old worries. It replays familiar thoughts. This psalm meets fear on its own ground, with repetition that restores instead of exhausts. Listen again, not as something new, but as something familiar. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. You have heard this before now, but hearing again is part of protection, because each time you return, your nervous system learns something important. I have been here before, and I was held. Repetition tells your heart, this place is safe. Fear tells you to scan for danger. This psalm invites you to remain in shelter. Fear says, stay alert. God says, stay close. And closeness changes how you breathe, how you think, how you wait. This is why people return to this psalm at night, before sleep, in hospitals, during long seasons of uncertainty. Not because life suddenly becomes predictable, but because God remains consistent. Dwelling is not passive. It is intentional presence. It is choosing again and again to let truth be louder than worry. When your thoughts wander, bring them back gently, not with force, with familiarity. He is my refuge and my fortress, My God, in whom I trust. You don't have to shout this. You don't have to convince yourself aggressively. Let it settle. Faith grows quieter as it grows stronger, and the more familiar this psalm becomes, the less power fear has to surprise you, because fear thrives on unfamiliar ground. This psalm makes peace familiar. It becomes the place your mind returns to when the day has taken too much. It becomes a rhythm your heart recognizes when anxiety tries to rush in. And here is something subtle but important. This psalm does not demand constant attention. It allows gentle return. You don't fail when your mind drifts. You return. You don't lose protection when you feel afraid. You dwell, and each return strengthens a habit of trust. That is why this psalm feels different. The second time, the fifth time, the 100th time, it begins to live inside you. So when you are alone, this psalm speaks. When the night feels long, this psalm covers. When decisions weigh heavily, this psalm steadies. And as we move toward the closing moments, there is one more invitation waiting for you. Not to listen harder, not to believe more intensely, but to respond gently, honestly, because peace deepens when it is shared. At some point, listening turns into response. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, a quiet response. This psalm does not pressure you to react immediately. It invites you to acknowledge what has already begun to shift. Maybe nothing in your life has changed yet. The circumstances are the same. The questions are still unanswered. And yet, something inside you feels steadier. That matters, because peace does not always announce itself with resolution. Sometimes it arrives as permission to breathe again. This is where many people misunderstand prayer. They think prayer is meant to change God's mind. But often, prayer changes where your mind rests. This psalm found you for a reason, not to fix everything instantly, but to reposition your heart, to remind you where safety actually lives. And here, gently, without pressure, comes an invitation. Not to perform, not to promise anything grand, just to respond honestly. If this psalm spoke to you, even slightly, acknowledge it. You don't need perfect words. You don't need long explanations. Sometimes a single sentence is enough. A quiet, "I'm here." A simple, "I needed this." A brief, "God, thank you." This response matters, not because God needs it, but because you do. Expression grounds experience. When you name what touched you, peace settles deeper. That's why I invite you, gently, to leave a comment, not for visibility, not for numbers, but as an act of presence. Write one word if that's all you have. Write peace. Write covered. Write Psalm 91. Or simply write, "This psalm found me." There is something powerful about naming safety in a world that constantly names fear. And when you do, you may notice something unexpected. You're not alone here. Others have arrived for different reasons, yet with the same need: protection, rest, reassurance, and your quiet response becomes part of a shared moment of refuge. This is how faith works in the modern world. Not always loudly, not always publicly, but honestly, personally. Before we move to the final moments, take one more breath. Slow, unforced. Let your shoulders rest. You don't need to carry everything right now. This psalm has already taken its place, and it will still be here when you need it again. Before we finish, there is something important to remember. This moment does not end when the video ends. This psalm was never meant to be consumed once and left behind. It was meant to be returned to. There will be days when you feel steady, days when fear feels distant, days when life flows more easily, and there will be days when it doesn't, days when anxiety creeps back in quietly, when old worries knock again, when the night feels longer than usual. On those days, remember this: you already know where to go. You don't have to search for new words. You don't have to find a different prayer. You don't have to start from nothing. You return, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. These words will still be waiting. That is the power of a psalm like this. It does not expire. It does not weaken over time. It grows more familiar, more grounding, more personal. The more you return, the more your heart recognizes the way home. Fear depends on urgency. God works through consistency, and consistency builds trust. When you return to this psalm, you are not retreating. You are recentering. You are reminding your soul that safety is not something you have to create. It is something you receive. This psalm teaches you how to rest without denying reality, how to trust without pretending life is easy, how to feel protected even when circumstances remain uncertain. That balance matters, especially in a world that constantly pulls your attention outward. This psalm pulls you inward, not into isolation, but into presence, into the quiet knowledge that you are seen, guarded, and held. And even if tomorrow brings challenges, you will not face them unaccompanied. Angels guarding your ways, God present in trouble, faithfulness as your shield. These are not metaphors meant to inspire momentarily. They are promises meant to be lived with. So when you leave this moment, take that with you. Not urgency, not pressure, just awareness. Awareness that you can return here, tonight, tomorrow. Anytime fear tries to speak louder than truth, this psalm will still be here, and so will the one who spoke through it. There's a kind of fear that does not come from danger, but from waiting for answers, waiting for change, waiting for clarity that refuses to arrive on your schedule. This psalm speaks into that space too, because waiting can feel like exposure, when nothing is decided yet, when outcomes are unclear, when you are between what was and what will be. Fear whispers, now you are vulnerable. But this psalm says something different. Protection does not pause while you wait. God does not guard you only when you move forward confidently. He guards you while you stand still, while you hesitate, while you consider, while you don't yet know what the next step should be. Waiting is not wasted time in God's presence. It is often where trust is refined. This psalm reminds you that safety is not tied to speed. You don't need to rush decisions to remain under protection. You don't need certainty to stay covered. He will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. All your ways includes waiting, includes indecision, includes pauses, includes moments where you are simply trying not to make things worse. Fear pressures you to act quickly so you don't feel powerless. God invites you to dwell so you don't forget who is in control. And when you wait under pressure, this psalm becomes an anchor. It keeps you from drifting into panic, from making fear-based choices, from confusing urgency with wisdom. Protection gives you permission to choose slowly, to listen longer, to pray quietly, to trust that nothing escapes God's attention. Just because you haven't moved yet, you are not late. You are not falling behind. You are being held, even here, especially here. This is why this psalm is so often returned to during seasons of uncertainty, because it does not rush you forward. It roots you downward. It reminds you that your life is not balancing on your decisions alone. God's faithfulness does not flicker when your confidence does. His presence does not thin out when your clarity fades. And as you wait, something else begins to happen. Fear slowly loosens its grip, not because answers arrive immediately, but because you are no longer facing the unknown alone. Waiting becomes less threatening when protection is already established. So if you are in a season where nothing feels settled, where plans feel fragile, where tomorrow feels distant, let this psalm cover you here. Not after things improve, not once decisions are made. Now, because protection is not a reward for certainty. It is a promise of those who dwell. And as we move toward the final moments, there's one last truth to rest in. This psalm did not find you to prepare you for fear. It found you to remind you that fear is not where your story ends. Fear always tries to sound final. It speaks as if what you feel now is what you will feel forever, as if uncertainty is permanent, as if peace is fragile, as if protection can disappear without warning. This psalm gently corrects that illusion. It reminds you that fear is a visitor, not a ruler. It may knock, it may linger, but it does not own the house, because the house belongs to the one in whom you dwell. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. That sentence does not describe a moment. It describes a way of living. And when you live there, fear loses its authority to define the future. This psalm does not promise a life without emotion. It promises a life without abandonment. You will still feel concern. You will still face unknowns. You will still have moments where your heart tightens. But those moments are no longer the conclusion. They are chapters, not the ending. Fear says, this is where it breaks. God says, this is where I remain. That difference matters. Because when fear is no longer final, it becomes manageable. You don't need to eliminate it completely. You only need to stop letting it decide. This psalm gives you that permission. It does not push you to feel fearless. It anchors you so fear cannot pull you under. And slowly, almost without noticing, your relationship with fear changes. It no longer controls your breathing. It no longer dictates your decisions. It no longer defines your nights. Because something stronger has taken its place. Presence, faithfulness, covering. This psalm does not shout that truth. It repeats it until your heart believes it. And belief here is not intellectual agreement. It is rest. Resting in the knowledge that nothing arrives in your life without passing through God's awareness first. That nothing touches you without His presence near. That even when fear speaks loudly, it does not speak last. The last word belongs to the one who said, I will be with him in trouble, not after trouble. in it, and that promise reshapes everything. It means fear is no longer a signal that God has left. It is often the moment He draws closer. So if fear brought you here, let it leave empty-handed. You are not the same person who started listening, not because life changed, but because perspective did. You are dwelling now, remaining, resting, and there is one final movement left, a gentle closing, not an ending. Now, there is nothing left to do, no action required, no decision demanded, no response expected, only rest. This is where the psalm leaves you, not energized, not rushed, not overwhelmed with instruction, but covered. This psalm did not find you to push you forward. It found you to let you lie down, to stop scanning, to stop racing, to stop carrying what was never meant to be held alone. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest. Rest is not something you earn at the end. It is something you are invited into now, right here, in this moment, before anything changes. You do not need to replay every word you heard. You do not need to remember everything perfectly. Your heart has already received what it needed. And even when you forget the details, the truth remains. You are not unprotected. You are not unseen. You are not exposed. This psalm will continue working quietly, long after the sound fades. Tonight, tomorrow, on the next night fear tries to speak. It will still be here. You can return to it when your thoughts feel loud, when sleep feels distant, when the future feels heavy. You don't need a new prayer. You already have one. You don't need new words. You already know where to dwell. And when you return, you won't be starting over. You'll be coming home. So let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders drop. Let your mind loosen its grip. Nothing needs to be solved right now. You are held. And if you find yourself returning to this psalm again, days from now, weeks from now, remember this. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Dwelling is not retreat. It is trust practiced over time. And trust grows quietly. This psalm found you for a reason, not to impress you, not to rush you, not to demand anything from you, but to remain with you, and it will. Stay here as long as you need.